She's too small to even reach the breach handle M1 Abrams simulator echoed with laughter as Riley climbed inside someone a dead May. She thinks this is a video game, but 2 minutes later the room felt completely silent. She executed a textbook perfect maneuver under pressure, and then the colonel stepped forward, looked at the stunned recruits. From this moment forward, she's in charge. Command skills over size. If you believe confidence speaks louder than appearance. Her name was Riley Morgan, 28 years old, small frame, thin shoulders, brown hair tied back neatly, calm expression that revealed nothing. She appeared at the M1 Abrams Training Center at Fort Gilliam as part of an observer group. Unlike the other technical personnel, really didn't speak up during briefing. She just quietly took notes, which made the young soldier suspicious. Private Sanchez, 20 years old and full of himself, spoke loudly. This is tank training, not a PowerPoint class. Another recruit, Jaqued, she probably just fell off an ice cream truck. Really heard everything, didn't react to any of it. When the training instructor asked, would you like to try the simulator, she simply nodded and stepped into the M1 Abrams. Mock-up laughter filled the room, but less than 3 minutes laterally was operating the simulation flawlessly. STEM activation, perfect evasive maneuvering, textbook execution, target acquisitional, 3 enemy position sutra tiled within standard time parameters. Simulation ended with a message displayed across the main screen: targets neutralized, 0 errors. Through when dead silent, a deep voice called out from the back, what's your name? Morgan. Siri thought so. What the recruits didn't understand was that they just witnessed something impossible. M1 Abrams simulator was designed to challenge experienced tank operators. It required months of training to operate competently. Beauty had just run through advanced combat scenarios like she'd been doing it for years. The laughing stopped, the jokes ended, and sudden livery recruit in the room was looking at the small woman with new eyes, because in the military respect isn't earned through size or volume, it's earned through confidence under pressure, and Riley Morgan had just demonstrated a level of competence it left professional tank operators speechless. The question wasn't whether she could handle an M1 Abrams anymore. The question was, who was she really, and how did she know their equipment better than they did? Colonel Harrington, who'd been observing from the control room, had seen enough. He walked onto the training floor with an expression that meant business. Morgan, he said, his voice carrying absolute authority, step out of the simulator. Need to talk. Command earned respect if you know that actions always speak louder than assumptions. Really, Morgan had never been a tank operator, but she'd been something arguably more important: the lead software engineer responsible for the M1A2's F3 fire control system. For 3 years, she'd worked behind the scenes writing code that helped tank crews acquire targets faster, adjust for wind and weather conditions, and coordinate with other vehicles in complex battle-eyed scenarios. But software engineering was a desk job. She'd never actually been inside an operational tank. That changed when she received casualty reports from Iraq. 3 soldiers had been wounded because of a user interface malfunction. A critical targeting system had failed during combat, not because of a software bug, but because the interface was too complicated for operators under stress. Really realized that she'd been designating systems for users she'd never met, working in conditions she'd never experienced. So she made a decision that shocked her supervisor. She requested assignment to a classified pilot program that would put software engineers through actual operator training. If I'm going to write code that keeps people alive, told her commanding officer, need to understand what they're going through when they use it. For 6 months, Riley had been quietly embedded with training units learning tank operations from the ground up. She studied crew coordination, turret rotation, limitation, sensor failure protocols, and emergency procedures. She never revealed her background to the trainees. To them, she was just another technical observer who asked a lot of detailed questions, but she was actually learning how real operators used her software in high-stress situations, what shortcuts they took, what functions they ignored, what mistakes they made when everything was happening fast. Knowledge she gained was invaluable. She identified 17 separate interface improvements that could save lives in combat, but the pilot program required her to demonstrate actual operational competence, or her recommendations would be considered, which Me and she had to prove she could operate an M1 Abrams under pressure at simulation test was supposed to be a formality, a chance for her to experience operator's perspective before returning to her programming responsibilities. She hadn't expected to be mocked by recruits who didn't know she'd written the software he relied on, and she definitely hadn't expected to find herself defending her competence to people who were using systems she'd created. But here she was in a room full of young soldiers who thought she was some lost civilian who'd wandered into the wrong training facility. Irony wasn't lost on her. These recruits were learning to operate equipment that wouldn't exist without her work. They were developing skills that depended on code she'd written, but because she didn't fit their image of what a tank operator should look like, they assumed she didn't belong. Really could have identified herself at any time, could have explained her background and ended the mockery immediately, but she wanted to see how far their assumptions would take them, wanted to understand the mindset of operators who judge capability by appearance rather than performance. It was valuable research, and it was about to become a valuable lesson for everyone involved, because the recruits were about to learn that in the military, expertise doesn't always come in the package you expect, and confidence doesn't depend on meeting someone else's stereotype as comment hidden expertise. You know that the most valuable knowledge often comes from unexpected sources. Colonel Harrington, commanding officer of the M1 training unit, entered the simulator bay after reviewing Riley's performance data. He looked at Riley directly. "Oh, are you really Riley?" answered Simplithe, person who programmed the system they're using to laugh at me. Colonel Harrington nodded, then turned to address the entire training class. "You laughed because you thought she wasn't strong enough to operate this tank. You've seen men twice her size break down crying because they couldn't figure out which button to press in a real emergency." I activated the main display screen showing Riley's technical specifications and development history. A line of text appeared: Morgan sequence tactical override stability module. Colonel Harrington's voice filled the room. "She didn't just learn to operate this tank, she improved it to save the lives of soldiers like you in actual combat." Stepped back and made an announcement that changed everything from this point forward. "Morgan is lead instructor for all M1 simulation training. Ganyan who can't learn from her don't meet the standards for battlefield deployment." Privet Sanchez, who'd been the loudest marker, stepped forward. "Mommy, I'm sorry, I didn't know." Really looked at him steadily. "Tank doesn't care who's operating it, it only responds to competent control." But Colonel Harrington wasn't finished. Had pulled up Riley's full service record on the main screen. "Software engineer, first class Riley Morgan, 3 years developing fire control systems. 2 commendations for life-saving technical innovations. Current assigned to the Operator Experience Integrant program." The room buzzed with whispers as the recruits realized they'd been mocking someone whose work had literally kept tank crews alive. Combat. The targeting improvements she developed have been credited with preventing friendly fire incidents in 17 separate engagements. Colonel Harrington continued: "The interface modifications she designed have reduced operator error by 34 in high-stress scenarios." Riley held up her hands. "Here, with respect, they don't need my resume. They need to understand that this equipment only works when operated correctly, regardless of who's operating it." Colonel Harrington smiled, "Which is exactly why you're the right person to teach them." Turn back to the recruits. "Morgan will be conducting advanced simulation training. From now on, you'll learn not just how to operate this equipment, but why it works the way it does, and more importantly, you'll learn that confidence comes in many forms. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room looks like the least dangerous person in the room." On recruit raised his hand. "How do we know if we're operating the system correctly?" "Be listening to the tank," Riley replied. "Every sound, every vibration, every response tells you so. Mithinji programmed it to communicate with you. Your job is to learn its language." Another recruit asked, "What's the most important thing to remember in combat?" "That the software can help you make better decisions, but it can't make decisions for you when everything goes wrong. Your training and instincts are what keep you alive." Colonel Harrington added, "And that's where you're going to learn from someone who understands both the technology and the pressure you'll face when using it. Really step back into the simulator. Wants to learn how to really operate this mech, and every hand in the room went up for the next. For horse really taught the recruits advanced techniques that weren't in any manuals. Showed them how to recognize system failures before they became critical, how to maximize the effectiveness of targeting, how to coordinate with other vehicles and communication protocols. She'd helped design. By the end of the session, the recruits weren't just competent operators, they were beginning to understand the sophisticated technologies they'd been casually dismissing. And they understood that expertise comes from knowledge and experience, not from meeting physical stereotypes. Comment: technical master. If you believe understanding how something works is just as important as knowing how to use it. 3 weeks laterally was leading the same group of recruit through field training exercises. No more laughter, no more jokes about her size or appearance. Severine listened carefully to every instruction she gave. She didn't raise her voice or assert authority through intimidation. Every recruit could feel the precision and confidence. Spent her quiet commands. In afternoon, the training group completed their exercises early because they'd achieved the highest performance ratings in the program's history. Colonel Harrington arrived and placed a training command insignia on Riley's desk. He used to think only soldiers with battlefield experience howled. Lead tactical trainee was Ron. You've proven that understanding the technology is just as important as understanding the tactics. Training center installed a plaque in the main simulator control room. She rewrote the code, then rewrote the respect, but the real change was in the recruits themselves. They'd learned that confidence comes in many forms and that the most valuable knowledge often comes from people who don't fit conventional expectations. Private Sanchez, who'd been Riley's harshest critic, became one of her most dedicated students, requested additional training sessions, and eventually graduated at the top of his class. He said during his final evaluation, "You taught me that being wrong about Somiana can be the best lesson you ever learn." Really smiled. Being wrong is only a problem if you don't learn from it. You learned. That's what matter. 6 months later, when Sanchez deployed to his first combat assignment, he sent a letter back to the training center. "The techniques Morgan taught us saved my crew. Easterda encountered a situation that wasn't in any manual, but we knew how to handle it because she taught us to understand the equipment, not just operate." Really kept the letter in her desk drawer along with dozens of others from graduate tests. Were discovered that her unconventional teaching methods had prepared them for challenges they hadn't expected. The M1 training program at Fort Gentry became known throughout the military for producing exceptionally skilled tank operators. Other bases started requesting transfers to learn from the woman who teaches tanks to talk, but Riley remained focused on her original mission, making sure that the software she wrote actually served the people who used it in life or death situations. The mockery she'd endured had been transformed into respect, but more importantly, it had been transformed into better training that kept soldiers alive. Common teaching excellence. If you know faith, best instructors are those who truly understand their subject. There are people who enter a room without rank, without fanfare, without demanding attention. They just need one perfect button press and every prejudice dissolves. Relemio Gran didn't need anyone to acknowledge her strength. She just needed the M1 Abrams to respond the way she designed it. Toned when her precision saved lives. Didn't need to say a word. The most dangerous assumption is that confidence comes in a standard package. The most valuable lesson is that expertise often hides behind quiet confidence, and the most important recognition is when someone who was mobbed ends up leading the people who mobbed them. Look around your workplace or school, your community. Person everyone underestimates might be the one with the knowledge everyone needs. Don't judge by appearances, don't assume that size determines capability, and remember that the quietest person in the room might be the one who built the room. Owner the hidden experts learn from the unexpectedures and understand that sometimes the best response to mockery is flawless performance, because confidence doesn't need to justify itself, it just needs to be demonstrative. She spoke through action. If this story changed how you evaluate expertise,